saw this movie 5 times in 8 days, and the plan was to take a long break after that because I need to, because it's expensive and I am very broke right now. And then they announced that IMAX was leaving this week. So long story short, I'm seeing it again in a couple days. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel and to another video. Today we're gonna just briefly overview what chapters were covered in this movie, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts, feelings, and predictions on what that means for the next 2 movies. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Now, disclaimer, I know I've been telling you all for quite a while that I'm going to make a full-length review. I am going to do that. I have a couple reasons why I haven't done that yet. Number 1 is I have been really freaking busy. And I've only been able to sit down and record for like 30 to 45 minute increments, and my full-length review is definitely going to take longer than that. So hopefully this coming weekend, I'm recording this on a Monday, I'm hoping that this coming weekend I will actually have time to sit down and do that. Number 2 is I am actually taking time to fully review the manga chapters that it covered, because in my full-length review, I'm going to incorporate when they took out stuff, when they added stuff, how I felt they adapted this or that, because that majorly drives how I see the movie since I am a manga reader. And I feel like I haven't really seen too many people fully talk about things that got added, that got taken away, and so on. So I'm in the process of like reviewing all the chapters that they covered in this movie, and that will be a part of my review. So those are the 2 reasons why I haven't done it yet. I promise it's coming. Be on the lookout this coming weekend. Okay, but with that, we're gonna dive right in. But before we do, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment your thoughts. So diving right into it. This movie adapted 140 through a little bit of 157, so just over 17 chapters. Now this is kind of interesting because if you go all the way back to when I started making predictions about this trilogy, when they announced it right after Hashira training, which you can, this video is in a playlist with those videos if you want to check it out. I was very wrong. So by all means, when I talk about my full predictions of what the next 2 movies are going to cover, please take it with a grain of salt, because I missed the mark. Okay, I completely missed the mark, but I have reason for that. So yeah, but I was a little bit confused about how they were going to do it. Now granted, before they announced the timeline, like the length of this movie, was thinking they were going to keep it in the hour and 40 minute range, which they obviously did not. This was 2.5 hours. So that to me immediately kind of led me to believe that, okay, they are definitely going to get through everything in this trilogy. But then I looked up how many chapters were adapted in this first one, and now I'm confused. Because we only adapted 17 chapters in this movie, that would mean in order for the next 2 to completely finish the story, they would have to adapt 48 chapters. So both of them will definitely have to be over 20. If they even it out, each one will adapt 24. One might have to adapt like 25 or 26 and the other a little bit less. And that's definitely interesting. It definitely seems like we're in this weird spot where it's definitely going to end with these next 2 movies. I don't think there's enough content for them to stretch it out based off of what they did in the first one. But I can't help but feel like if these movies stay in the 2.5 hour range, it's still going to be a little rushed. I don't know. I trust Ufotable, I do, and I love them, and they've done such a good job so far. But I can't help but feel just a little bit nervous about the fact that the next 2 movies are going to adapt quite a lot more chapters than this one, and probably are not going to have that much of a longer runtime. I know people in both Japan and around the world have been not that happy about the runtime, which I disagree with. I think more movies should be 2.5 hours long. That's my hot take, I guess. But nonetheless, that's what they decided to do. They did end it in a good spot because they ended it right before we dive right into another battle that's quite a few chapters. It's pretty normal for them to not end something in the middle of a battle. I was thinking they might have ended it a little bit earlier in the Akaza fight, or even right before it started, if they were going to do like this trilogy as just the Infinity Castle and then Sunrise Countdown gets its own thing, which that is definitely debunked based off of my previous predictions, I thought Sunrise Countdown was going to get something separate from the trilogy, and I think it's very obvious now that it's going to be a part of the trilogy. It'll probably be the final movie. But where they ended it, it makes sense with how they tend to pace things, but it also makes me feel nervous for the next two. So again, 17 chapters, they were very faithful. There were some things that got taken out, which I'll talk about in the review. There were some things that got added, which I'll talk a little bit more about the review. The things that got added were very minuscule. It wasn't like Hashira Training, where they were literally adding full episodes, essentially, that were anime original content just to make it a full-length season. These were smaller moments, like I think I talked about this already, but in the first sequence, right when the movie opened, when Giyu saves Tanjiro, 90% of that was actually anime original content. In the manga, we see Tanjiro do his little, what is this place? What's happening? I need to not fall to the bottom or I'm gonna die. He says, grab onto something and, oh, I'm out of position, I can't. And then we just immediately see Giyu grab his Haori. Like, this is him talking about hitting the bottom. This is him saying, oh, I can't, and then Giyu grabs his Haori. So all of that moment where Giyu comes flying through the castle like a freaking superhero with his sword out and his eyes locked on Tanjiro, make sure he saves him, using the water breathing to stabilize him, throwing him onto the little platform, Tanjiro falling through the railing, and then he grabs his Haori. All of that in between was anime original content. They did that a lot during this movie, where they just added like 20 seconds of additional content that wasn't in the manga, which I will talk about more. But they're gonna have to be careful because in the next two, they're gonna have to cover a lot more ground, so that might not happen as much. So overall, like when it comes to the amount of chapters adapted, it's not that I'm like super worried. At the end of the day, I'm gonna love whatever they give me. I think they're still gonna do an absolutely fantastic job. I'm just in a position of, I already feel like the final battle is a little bit rushed in the manga. I still think it's a very good ending, considering that it felt rushed. I want them to expand upon a few things, and to the way they're setting things up, they're not gonna have time to do that. So that's more just like a personal preference, I guess. They don't have to expand upon anything. The manga itself is very good and very popular, but it worries me a little bit. They paced it just like the manga is, though. They didn't really rearrange anything. There was a couple of moments that they changed it up a tiny bit. Again, I'll talk about that in the review. But overall, it was pretty much to a T, those 17 chapters, chapter 140 through a little bit of 157. So if you are not a manga reader and you are looking to pick up the manga and get caught up before the next movie, you can start just with 157, which is in volume 18. So there you go. If you want to know what happens next, that's... Oh wait, this is 16. 18. This is 18. Kanao. ASMR. So overall, it covered like half of 16, all of 17, and a little bit of 18. And for reference, there's 23 volumes. Now, if you consider the runtime of the movie in anime format, each episode usually runs roughly 20 minutes of actual content, because it's like a little under 24 minutes when it's on Crunchyroll's server. But if you deduct opening credits, which is usually a minute and a half, closing credits, which is usually a minute and a half, and then the Taisho Secret, which is usually around 30 seconds, and you just get the content, it's about 20 minutes. So that means that if this were an anime, that would have been about 7.5 episodes. We'll see. I'm still thinking they're probably going to release this episodically in around a year-ish. We'll see how many episodes. I could see them doing 8 episodes, maybe doing what they did with Mugen Train, where they added an anime original episode about, they would probably do it about Shinobu, I would assume. That would make the most sense, because they did one about Rengoku, that they would do one about Shinobu. If you know, you know. But they did really space out these chapters, because when you think about it, Entertainment District is 30 chapters, and it had a runtime, it was 11 episodes, but it technically had a runtime of about 13 when you consider the first and the last were extended. So half of that would be, well, I guess, no, that's about the same. That's about the same pacing as they would do, which means that these next two movies, they have to pace it faster, or they have to make them 3 hours long, which I just don't see is gonna happen. Anyway, that's that. I'm just giving my opinion on this and everything. I'm just yapping as I usually do. Let's talk about where I think the next movie is going to end. I'm going to briefly just discuss it using chapter numbers so you don't get spoiled, and then I'll let you all know when I start dipping into some spoilers to discuss where I think it's going to end. So first things first, one of the things that I want to mention is that they don't tend to end things on a major cliffhanger. I always expect things to end on like huge cliffhangers, like people's lives hanging in the balance, that sort of thing. Because I grew up on American network television where when a season ended, they had to leave it on like the most annoying type of cliffhanger. Otherwise, people wouldn't keep watching. They don't have to do that. People are going to watch the third movie, no matter if this second movie ends on a cliffhanger or not. Do I think it's still going to be a little bit of a cliffhanger? Yes. But I originally thought it was going to be a huge cliffhanger, and then I looked at where that cliffhanger was, and it was the end of 184. And I don't want them to squeeze that much into one movie, because that's 27 chapters, so a whole 10 chapters more than what we just got. Yeah, I don't think they're going to make it all the way there. Instead, what I think is way more realistic would be for the second movie to cover all the way until the end of chapter 180. Which would mean that the third movie would cover 181 through 205, which would mean both of those movies would cover about 24 chapters, and it would even them out. Not to mention, the end of 180 would be a fairly, it's a bit of a cliffhanger. It's actually really freaking sad, but it wouldn't be so cliffhangery that people are like, what the heck? So I'm gonna discuss some manga spoilers now. If you don't want to know what I'm talking about here, then now's your time to click off. 3, 2, 1. So I'm just going to show y'all the panel that I think that it would end on. I think that this is just a really great way to end it. I have a few thoughts on them ending it. It's Muzan saying, "You're all useless. Tonight I will crush the demon slayers. I will kill them all." Now, am I completely correct in this? I don't know, because they did add some stuff with Muzan saying kind of similar things to end the first movie. So it seems like it might be a little bit redundant for them to end it like that. And my other issue with them ending it there is that would mean that Tanjiro would not be in this movie. He would essentially get maybe 5 minutes of screen time. And I don't say this as a Tanjiro stan, I would be sad that he doesn't have screen time. I say this as I don't think Ufotable wants to have an entire movie that has no screen time for their main character. So that's my only problem with that. It could go a little bit farther, because right after that, they kind of start to engage with Muzan, and Tanjiro is there. He becomes very prevalent once that happens. I mean, for all we know, because they're not ending it at the end of a chapter like they didn't with the first one, it could end here, with Tanjiro seeing Muzan, in his final form, and, instantly becoming super freaking angry. I mean, look at him here. And that will give him kind of, his moment. And that would be a cliffhanger, but not, a huge cliffhanger that's oh my god, I need this movie right the frick now. And that actually is the end of that chapter. Tanjiro says, Muzan, we cannot allow you to exist anymore. So, this could be a good second choice for them to end. It's just a chapter later. This is the end of chapter 181. So I think that might be a good one too, because Tanjiro kind of gets his closing moments of the movie so that he's a bit more prevalent in the end. I might say that's my more go-to. And it might be partially because I'm a Tanjiro stan, and I'm a little bit sad. I know the next movie he's just not really gonna be in. And that was one of the reasons why I thought that they were going to do it completely different, where the Tanjiro and Giyu fight was gonna be more in the second one, because then they could spread it out where Tanjiro was prevalent in each movie. But I don't work there. I don't know what's inside their heads. But I think that's kind of it. Oh, if you want to know, if you don't want to find the video, the original, okay, I have a third guess, and it would be the end of 182. So we're just adding more and more. The only reason I'm not sure exactly where it's gonna end is because I just don't know how many chapters. It's just very different. It's hard to predict when they're doing things very differently than they normally do. But I mean, this would make a lot of sense if the movie ended with the Infinity Castle breaking down and they all come to the surface. That would also make a lot more sense. And then we would be talking about 25 chapters-ish. The next chapter was the thing I originally thought, but I think at this point we are definitely going too far, and I just don't know if they really want to end it on that major of a cliffhanger. But the end of chapter 184, of course, is Muzan saying that Tanjiro is dead. So that would be a really mean cliffhanger, like really freaking mean. I could still see them doing that. I think it's just a little bit too far ahead. I just don't, they would have to make that movie 3 hours long. They probably need to make these next two movies as similar in chapter length as possible to keep up with consistency, especially after people complained about the pacing of this movie, which I'll get more into in my full review. I talked about it in my normal review, but yeah, they gotta be careful. I'm not, it's hard to predict because the first one only adapting 17 chapters. It makes sense because of where they ended it. Like, I think that's where they needed to end it, but it's gonna definitely cause for possibly some issues for the next two of getting a little bit rushed, but they did a very good job at adapting it nonetheless. They are very, very true to the source material. They really don't take a lot of liberties, and I feel like the liberties that they do take are very good. They add to the story rather than just add useless information that we don't need. So that's how they adapted it. Be on the lookout this weekend. I promise the big review is coming, but that is going to be it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment your thoughts, and I'll see you all next weekend. Yeah, matane.